So this is a video that's been a long time coming. It's been a product that we've been trying to get a solution for and made. It's been out of stock for a couple of years. Just kind of came back in stock at a ridiculous price. And in the meantime, we had a solution that we came up with, and we're getting produced and whatnot. So we wanted to show you. It's going to be kind of a dual purpose video. We're talking about the spindle bushings that go inside your axle on your loaders, your 6000 to 600 series. As well as we've got a full front end upgrade kit, and often on the loaders this gets overlooked, but it's something that gets worn and abused quite a bit. And this machine's a good example. This machine we're gonna have for sale here pretty quick. It's a nice 6018. It's definitely been used, but it's a decent solid machine. Threw a real quick coat of paint on it just to clean it up, make it presentable, but it's a solid machine. But you'll see, I'm gonna rock this manual, the wheel with the power steering off, and you'll see how much movement's in that axle. How much movement going back and forth, and you'll also see in here that there's all kinds of movement, and these the bushings in the spindle are shot, as well as the axle moving, as well as these bushings inside here being shot. I don't know if you can see, this is actually moving. These tie rod ends are absolutely blown away too. So I'm turning this wheel before that wheel even reacts, before you even get any turning out of this thing. I'll start this up too so you can see it under power. Let's see how much I got to move this wheel before the tires even react. There's a solid half a turn there almost before you get any turn out of the wheels. This way it's even worse. Almost a full turn. So like I said, a good solid machine. It's got some use in it. There's some play probably in the valve and the pump there. And we're not going to be able to do anything about that today. But tightening this up will make it a huge difference. So I'm just going to rock this back and forth, you know, half to 3/4 of a turn, so you can see how much play is going on and everything before the wheels even start to turn. Not only a safety issue, but it makes it a little tougher operating. And once things start wearing, they wear much faster. So this is the main side. You can see the piston moving before the tire even moves. There's a lot of ways to travel there. This turning radius is affected. So we're going to put new heavy-duty Heim joints on here that are greasable. We're going to replace the axle pin. We're actually going to put poor man's power steering. Even though this is a power steering machine, the poor man's power steering helps quite a bit. Makes it a little easier turning, but it just takes some friction away and makes it easier on the rest of your components. And the main part of this video is going to be those bushings inside that axle spindle, where you see that spindle moving back and forth. And this arm also has play on top of that axle. We're not going to replace that. It's a pretty pricey arm. I think we're going to do the rest of it, and that'll take care of the majority of the play here. And install our new spindle bushings, and that'll tighten this right up. And we're not going to show you how to take this off. It's pretty self-explanatory. You got your center axle pin up front that gets pulled, and then you just connect your rod end from the arm up here from your power steering cylinder, or if you have a drag link on a non-power steering tractor, it's the same principle. You're going to jack your tractor up, support it safely, and we're going to do it on the bench so you can see exactly how we replace those spindle bushings. So I'm going to shake this here, and it's going to be hard to see it all because everything's moving. But I don't know if you can see the play in this spindle here. That's huge. Those things are shot. It's probably worn the axle a little bit in the spindle. That should not move at all. You shouldn't get any side to side. I can't get the forward and back motion really the way we're set up here, but you can see when I'm doing this here what's going on. It should have zero movement. This side isn't nearly as bad, but there is, I lied. There is actually quite a bit there too. With all this play here, you can see everything moving. This axle back and forth. This axle should not move back and forth at all. We'll show you in the bench our product that we've come up with and the little differences and the cost differences. So I want to apologize for the mess. We've been swamped. It's been insane for the last few months, and working in not a clean shop or area kind of drives me nuts, but it is what it is right now. We'll get caught up hopefully. All right, so there's a few different bushings I think they've used over the years. We've seen them come in different machines and different materials. These ones are basically a brass lined bushing. Every one I've seen so far has been slit, and then they have a spacer in between. So this would go on the bottom of your axle, then they put the spacer in, and they put this in here. I'm not really 100% sure of the reasoning for that. The bigger slot might make sense for allowing more grease in where the grease fitting is, or to save some money and have the bushing on the top and the bottom where most of your forces and your energy is going to be pulling against. So this is a set we pulled out of a 600 series fairly recently. This is just what one of the new old stock spacers looked like, just a piece of steel that's just rolled. And then this also is a new old stock, but this here itself is a bushing. I'll open it up. There's some talk, people saying that there was always a brass line, and I've seen them before where they weren't, and wasn't sure if they were replaced OEM or not. But you'll see this one here is basically like the spacer, but it's the same height and size as these, with a bigger gap in there. So something's better than nothing. I know guys were using some truck air brake parts. The crazy thing is, we looked for 2 years and bought dozens of bushings and talked to people about getting them manufactured and trying to find a solution, because these came out of stock a while ago and they're very important. They were a pretty good mover for us, even though they were priced very high for what they are. It's better than wiping out your very expensive axle and spindles, and it's a wear item that should be replaced, you know, on a fairly regular basis. This was the latest generation that came out from Ingersoll a while ago, and they sell these as a individual parts. We put them together as a kit. I think you can buy a kit per side. When we did our kit, we had 4 bushings and 2 spacers, so you did the whole axle in one shot. These are actually lined with like a Teflon PTFE material in here, and then maybe some brass behind it. It's really hard to say for sure, but that's the deal. But they're an odd size. They're not an easy size. There's not off-the-shelf size bushing defined. And we tried a whole bunch of different options and having things machined, and you know, some things worked out good, some things not. The price, cost, and then we finally came up with a pretty effective solution, we think. And these are what we're going with. So there were bronze lined bushing in here, a heavy duty steel on the outside, and then it's actually got a nice grease groove cut into it, along with the slit and a couple of pockets for grease here. And these we got to fit just about right. Took some work to get them machined where we wanted them to, and to save some money. And what we're doing is, if you notice the height difference, they're about a third again higher. And we're trying to eliminate the need for the spacer and give you more bushing material, which will help keep things wearing longer and better support. So these two, we're going to leave a gap in between, but you'll notice there's not a huge difference when it's said and done. So this will be the gap that's in between. It's going to give you more room for grease to hang out and do its thing. And these, I don't think are going to move, honestly. Once they're in there, they should not have much movement up and down. If they move a little bit, it's not the end of the world anyways. So we were pretty excited about this. These are going to be slotted too, so you got some room for expansion. If your axles are worn a little bit more or whatnot, it gives you a little bit of room to play and finagle. And they're chamfered on the end, so you can, when you're installing them, they'll center and hopefully go in pretty decent. It's been a long work in progress, and it's been hard to find a solution, and it's been time consuming and expensive. The biggest thing now is that this kit from the Ingersoll parts distributor now, to do both sides of your axle, which would be 4 of these pieces and 2 of these, is around $250, which is getting crazy. This kit used to be, I think, the $150, $170 range. I'm thinking we're going to be able to do it between that $130 to $150 range. And again, that's going to be the whole axle. So it'll be 4 of these, and you're done. We're still working out the final pricing, but it's definitely not going to be $250 where you're going to have 4 of these and 2 spacers. These I think are a better material, probably going to last a bit longer. I like the idea of the grease groove in here, so your grease is definitely getting in here one way or the other. When you're installing these, you want the slits, no matter which ones you're installing, you want the slits to be right where the grease fitting is. So that way the grease, if the grease fitting's on this side, you want to line it up with the grease fitting, so when you're pumping grease in, it works its way in here. It's going to work its way in our channels too as well. When you're using a spacer, if you're doing the original ones, you absolutely want the slit there, because otherwise this is going to block your grease fitting. So it's very important to line these up. And with the spacer, without the spacer, the grease will still find it if you don't line ours up, but it makes it a lot easier to line these up. And now we're going to go to the install. Alright, again, excuse the mess. Your front axle might come apart a little different depending on your years, and some of these are set up with splines, some are set up with keys, and how the spindles are held in and whatnot. But I should be using a bigger pair of pliers for these, but we're going to make do with what we got. And we definitely don't have a C spindle, as you can see. And watch your feet. Well, there's a little wear in here. Oh, there is nothing left in here. There's the spacer. When these things are, I'll rub my finger in here, there's not much of a lip. So take your spindle, set it aside for now. So on the side where your steering arm is, you want to mark it so it's indexed or clocked where it needs to be. I like to do it in 2 spots and make your lines a little different. And that way you know you're going to line up your lines, and then your splines are in the right spot. If you're keyed, it's not critical, but if you don't know if you're keyed or splined, definitely a way to do it. You see how shot this is on the bench now? And destroyed. Remember your order of how things came apart and went together. And these are just completely gone. Like, these are going to be tough to knock out because there ain't nothing to knock out on. This is why, if people don't do this, it turns into a much bigger project. This will help here. Unfortunately, if those spindles are worn any, it's not going to fix that problem, but we'll see what we can do here. You don't want to knock them in with the new ones. You'll destroy the new ones. You want to use something that's going to fit in the axle, but still hit your bushings. That's going to be too big, unfortunately, I think. Maybe not. Hard to say. You want to try to hit them even too. Can't hurt to put a little penetrating oil in there and hope for the best, honestly, but if these are in decent shape as far as having some play in them, they usually knock out pretty decently. As you can see, not much left to that thing. There's the spacer. I hate banging on sockets with the extension, but this one isn't fighting too bad. So I think we'll be alright. Yep. So we'll show you these a little bit later, but there's the split. Very important you clean these up before you put the new bushings in. The bushings are going to be a little tight in here usually, depending on how worn this is, obviously. You got all the old grease, any dirt, grime out of it. Run a paper towel in here. If you've got any caking of the grease, you got to get it out. If it's hard caked grease in here, you can hurt your new bushings going in. You also want to make sure your grease fitting is clear. You want to make sure the grease fitting works before you put your new bushings in. So just gonna make sure grease fitting's working. If it's not, fix it or replace it. Yep, she's working. Otherwise, if it's not, it's kind of a waste because you're going to wear your new bushings right out if you don't grease them. So this stuff you can coat with grease, coat with a gel lube, whatever you want to do, but get it clean. This one actually didn't have a lot of caked up grease because I don't think it was greased a ton. Alright, so again, your grease fitting's over here. You want to line your slot up with the grease fitting. These ones dropping right in. This is kind of worn, so normally you'll have to put them in a little harder. And this is where the tricks kind of come into play a little bit. So if it was going harder, use a piece of aluminum or wood so you don't damage the bushing, and you get it in there evenly. If you get one side or the other, it's going to get cocked and it'll fight. Put it flush with the top. That's fine. And again, since this one's going so easy, normally I would flip this over, but these are going right in, so there's no need to. I also coat these a little bit of grease, oil, whatever. It does a couple things, going to help you on the install, but again, line up your slot with the grease fitting. Some are going to take a fair bit of force to get these in there, and some will not. Some will just slide in, but these should be okay, like that. Again, you want to get it just below flush, and then hopefully you can see in there. And you'll notice if you look in there, maybe the flashlight, you see it inside good. So there's not a big gap between the two of them because our bushings are bigger. I don't know if you can see the gap in there, but it's tiny. I wouldn't even think it's 3/8 of an inch, but it lines up, if you watch, perfectly with the grease fitting. Just wanted to show you that. We'll grease these once it's on the machine. That's the time to grease them. So then you're going to want to go ahead and clean up whatever you got here for your spindles. You don't need to watch us clean this, but we're going to take it over, clean it up. There's a spacer under here that we're going to replace with the poor man's power steering. So that's where this spacer goes here, and that will get replaced, and then we will be back for the install. Alright, so again, we're replacing this spacer that was down here with our poor man's power steering. If you haven't seen this, we got a full video for the garden tractors. It's the same purpose. We're taking hardened thrush washers. It gets us thrush needle bearing, and then this all pivots and rotates and takes away all that friction, and it's making your steering easier. It's making less fight and resistance on the rest of your steering components. The other thing it's doing is protecting the bottom of your axle and the top of your spindle arm, because normally these are wearing on that washer. When you put this on, then everything's going to pivot on the bearing. So it's pretty important to do. If you're not installing our poor man's power steering, then just put that thick washer on here. Always coat this up with oil, grease, spray lube, whatever you want. Very important. Helps with installation and keeps any corrosion away. This goes on first, and then normally we'll pack a bunch of grease around here too. We pack this full of grease. These are something you kind of want to regularly grease. You don't always have to remove them to grease them. What you can do is lift your axle up off the ground with the bucket or whatever, and the spindle will drop a little bit, and then you can just open these up a slight bit and then push grease in. These do last quite a while. It depends on how heavy loads you're doing and how often you're using your loader. On the garden tractors, they last a very long time. On the loaders, not nearly as much because you've got a lot of weight always in the bucket and wearing on this. But they're fairly inexpensive and worth it in our opinion. Again, depending on how wore your spindle is, sometimes this might fight a little bit. Other times, like you see here, it's just going to fall almost right in. Now I got to move this axle out because the spindle doesn't want to go in where it is. And just spin that around a little bit. The other thing you want to do too, I should have mentioned, is make sure that this is flat where the poor man's power steering is. If you got to take a file across that, same thing with the bottom of your axle. This one I checked, it's good. Otherwise, this is going to sit at an angle and things aren't going to work or wear right. This is, you know, from the factory, it's cleaned up a little bit, but sometimes not as well as they should be. And then remember our lines here. the next thing we're going to do is going to take this spacer that was on top here. So what I should have told you too is when you could mark all three. I usually, when I do it, I line this arm up here with the axle, because obviously this pivots. You only have these two marks to line up. So what you're trying to line up is this and this essentially. So keep this lined up here. If you want, you can mark a line right through all three of them. Probably the better thing to do. Again, make sure this surface is pretty true. Put the stock washer back in there. Make sure the surface under here is true again. And then take your marks and line them up. Now with the Poor Man's Power Steering, your gaps is pretty similar here, but not exact. And you want to make sure that this can drop a little bit. It's supposed to go up and down slightly, not a lot, but a little bit. And then when you pull this up, it's going to bottom out against here. And now you'll notice, even without the grease in here, how nice this turns. So it's definitely better than it was, but there's still some play. The spindle and the axles are probably worn. The spindle's definitely worn some from those bushings being so bad. So, you know, it's part of a lesson of don't let those spindles, those bushings go so long from being replaced. And there's definitely some play in these splines here. I mean, it kind of is what it is until you want to buy I think this thing's close to 300 bucks, and this thing's probably at least that. So it's kind of where you're at. It's going to function. It's definitely better than it was, but it's not 100% like some of these other ones should be, which I'll show you. We're going to do the same thing over here. This side's worn too. I'm going to push up so there's no pressure on it, but there you go. It's in that groove. That's what holds that on there. Very important. Normally we'd probably go through and replace the wheel bearings, but these ones aren't too bad on here. There's not much play in them. This one don't sound bad at all. And so we did our Poor Man's Power Steering. The main part of the video to show you our affordable solution to the axle spindle problems. Bushings that have been no longer available and then now skyrocketed. I think actually going to be a better solution. It's definitely going to be far cheaper and a great alternative. But that's up to you which direction you want to go. Normally we run a long test period on things, and these have been on a couple machines so far with no problems, but with the price difference of the new ones and the lack of availability, we're sending these out and making them available to you guys. I got this one half apart, but I just wanted to show you guys this one. Less play in here. Did you notice that? This is how they're supposed to be. When there's some play in there, that's why we're replacing these. You see a little play in there rocking. And this still drags a little bit, doesn't just fall right out. So you can see these are in better shape. This is just a brass lined, your spacer. These aren't the Teflon ones. Again, you want to clean these out real good, make sure your grease fitting's good, and then we'll be back. So again, take your slot, you want to line it up with your grease fitting. A little bit of lube on there, a little bit of lube in here. I just lightly start them with a soft hammer, that way they're kind of going in. And you'll notice this one is not going in by hand. It's your piece of wood or aluminum or whatever you got. And that's it. Dropped in actually pretty nice. And we'll do the same with the bottom one. Line up the fitting for the grease. And then this one is probably where it should be, maybe a hair more down. I just like to get them a little bit below flush, not much. Yeah, that's plenty. That's probably more than enough. Same thing down there. And then you'll see this one is harder to go in already. Yep. These spindles are not nearly as worn as the other ones. Probably should have put a little more lube on them. There we go. Now you'll see it's nice and tight. That's because the spindle isn't worn like the other ones are. There's no play in there, and I don't even have it bolted up yet. There's a little bit of resistance here. That's because we don't have the poor man's power steering on there, and these just got to wear and fit in pretty nice. There might be a spot on here that's higher than not. These are old, they're worn, but once you get it up there, you'll feel it. It's a little more drag. If I drop it down, it's a little looser. It's because this is worn a little different, and also because of we got longer bushings in here. So part of the shaft was sitting in nothing, and the spacer wasn't riding on it. So part of the shaft is wider than the rest of it because it's original. So where these bushings are and ours are longer, you got part of the shaft that was never riding on anything. So it's not worn at all. And then you just put this together the same way, but I just wanted to show you what a nice tight fit is. Just one quick tip too, before you install these again, just take a little bit of a wire brush, a little bit of sandpaper, emery cloth, roll lock disc, and get any burrs or mushrooming that might be here, and it'll make your installing much easier. All it takes is a tiny, tiny little burr. Even from knocking this out, you could have done it. So just clean these top lips off a little bit. So this machine, the spindles are worn, as you saw when we were taking it apart, pretty good. The hole for the axle pin in the frame and in the axle was worn pretty good, so we welded in our custom axle pin for the loaders. We have a whole video on that. You can recenter those holes and it gives you a much more load-bearing surface. You don't have to weld it in with this machine. We chose to. Did a quick job there. But if you look, there's a lot of play still on this arm and on these splines because of the spindle itself. And there's still a little bit in here, but it's at least 3 times better than what it was. So now most of the play's here. These ends we replaced. There's no play left in those ends. As soon as this moves, they move. Same thing over here. As soon as the end moves. So most of the play is just left, right in this arm here. That could be replaced. It's not cheap, but it functions. The tractor drives fine as it is. We still have to go and tighten these all up. We just did a final adjustment. And the play in this spindle is 100 times better, but it's still got some. And now I'm moving the steering wheel, you know, probably quarter to half before it was half to 3/4 to a full turn before we had any action. And right now it's probably about 1/4 to 1/3. So I'll lift it up off the ground. Much faster. You go back and look before. Machine, it's got some hours, it's got some use on it. It's not brand new, but before when I was driving it, it would wander, it wouldn't react. It's much nicer now. And we'll show you what a real tight machine looks like with our new bushings in there. This machine's got our bushings in there, our front end kit, and she's super tight. And you'll notice instant. There's no play in that spindle and that arm. And that's how it's supposed to be. The 6018 we showed you had some play out. It was a little lack of maintenance, but as soon as this wheel spins up here, it's instant. And that's the way it should be. So if you got a machine that's not overly worn, you put new bushings in, or front end kit, or axle pin, and you'll get that, and these things will turn on a dime for a loader. The kit's available at CaseIngersollTractors.com along with everything, or you can buy the individual components. And our axle bushings, spindle bushings are on there as well. And we've got full videos on the axle pin, and installing the rod ends is the same as the video on the garden tractor. So we were pretty excited to get these bushings in, and it's been a lot of time and money invested and a long time coming, and hope a bunch of you guys are satisfied with it. And we're going to continue to offer you guys products that are either no longer available, or upgraded products, or products that are hopefully more affordable. And that's our goal here, to make it work for everybody. Thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe and visit us at CaseIngersollTractors.com.